Over the summer, I began to read a book about the history of Jerusalem, which started with its destruction at the hands of the Romans in 70. And what I discovered is that as horrific as the depiction of that destruction is in the book of Lamentations that we read this evening, it is nothing compared to the horrors that are described in the book of Josephus. Josephus, the Jewish historian who turned to side with the Romans and chronicled minute by minute the destruction of the city. And in it we read of a city that had been starved by the siege for weeks, so much so that those living in it had turned to cannibalism. Those thousands and thousands of Jews who died, who perished by sword, by fire, by being crushed by the heavy stones of the city as it was being destroyed. And the question that we really need to ask ourselves this evening as we mourn the loss of our temple is how? How did this come to be? How did we allow ourselves to be in a position where we saw each other not as brothers and sisters, but as enemies? Where we learned to mistrust each other so much that we didn't even recognize the kinship that we had with each other, and thereby allowed ourselves to be so vulnerable that we were overtaken by the Romans. How does such a thing happen? How did such a thing happen to us? And how do we prevent such a thing from happening in the future? That is one of the questions at the heart of the observance of Tisha B'Av. And the answer to how it is that we can prevent this from happening in the future, I believe, is quite clear in the story, the amazing story that you are about to hear from Pastor Chris Edmonds, who's going to tell you about his father, Army Master Sergeant Roddy Edmonds, whose fearless bravery saved the lives of Jewish American soldiers in a POW camp in Germany. And thanks to his son Chris, this story has been told throughout the world on many different kinds of media, in written media, on television, ABC, CBS, NBC, you name it, the Times, the Post, Facebook, Twitter, all over the place. So Pastor Chris has been a wonderful messenger for his father, and since he learned the story after his father's death, has been doing all he can to ensure that all of us learn the lessons of his life. Because of Master Sergeant Roddy Edmonds' bravery, he has been recognized throughout the Jewish community, both here in America and in Israel. I'm told, though I didn't notice it, unfortunately, because I didn't know the context, that there is an amazing portrait of Master Sergeant Edmonds in our own Dallas Holocaust Museum, and as well as the fact that Master Sergeant Edmonds was recognized by Yad Vashem. He's one of the only 5 Americans who were recognized among the righteous Gentiles who were memorialized and honored at Yad Vashem. Pastor Chris is the author of an award-winning book, No Surrender. He's an inspirational speaker. He's also the retired senior pastor of Piney Grove Baptist Church in Maryville, Tennessee. He's a business graduate from the University of Tennessee, a senior professional in HR, and holds a master's degree from the Liberty Theological Seminary. He also teaches leadership to military leaders at the University of Alabama at Huntsville, and he and his wife, Regina, live in Maryville with their 3 amazing daughters and sons-in-law, and 10, as he says, of the coolest grandchildren on the planet. We're looking forward to hearing from Pastor Chris, but first I want to acknowledge how grateful we are to Charles and Joanne Teichman for helping to sponsor Pastor Chris's visit this morning. Thank you so much for making the connection and making this morning possible, and also co-sponsoring our Kiddush lunch. So we'll have a chance now to hear from Pastor Chris, and also at the end of the service after Kiddush, we'll move the table away, and the 2 of us will sit down and begin a conversation that we hope we'll be able to share with everybody. So without further ado, Pastor Chris Edmonds, welcome.
Can I have 2 extra minutes?
Absolutely.
Okay. Congregation, thank you for having me. I bring you greetings from Piney Grove Baptist Church in Maryville, Tennessee. Can you say Maryville? Oh, that is fantastic. Congratulations, you are now genuine East Tennessee hillbillies. Welcome to the family. I want to thank you for the honor of worshiping with you. I love worshiping with you. Your faith is rich. Your faith is my faith. Piney Grove Baptist Church loves and honors and worships the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we are grateful for all of you and the work that you're doing here in Dallas and beyond. Keep doing your work. Keep serving the community and our world. It's much better and brighter because of you. And I also want to thank Charles and Joanne for their love for our family. You are a great blessing to us, and we are grateful to you and to the lives that you touch, not only here in Dallas, but across the world. Thank you for honoring my father by placing his portrait in the Dallas Holocaust Museum. If you haven't been there, you need to go. Shameless plug for the Dallas Holocaust Museum. I also want to say I'm grateful to the Lord. All that's been accomplished, the Lord has done. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to share Dad's story. It's a story that I've been sharing all across the world, any opportunity from 2 people, 1 person, to thousands. And so I'm grateful to be here to share his story. It's a story of unconditional love. That's the theme I want you to listen for as I share his story. There's many lessons we could learn, but the one lesson I want us to learn today is love. Love beyond boundaries, love beyond circumstances, and love beyond risk. My story begins with an old diary, a weathered, fragile book. It belonged to my father as a young man while he was fighting for his country on a continent near the edge of collapse. Now, my father passed away many years ago in 1985, as a matter of fact, and he never shared what he did during the war with us. And since then, that diary remained tucked away with other mementos from his time during World War II. He served with distinction, like so many of our own family and friends who have served in the military. I see one here who has served in the military, one of our Jewish war veterans. We are grateful to you, sir, grateful to all who have served. I want to identify you today, but thank you for those who have served and who are serving. We are blessed by your service. Master Sergeant Roddy Edmonds of the 106th Infantry was captured during the Battle of the Bulge and spent 100 harsh days in 2 German prisoner of war camps. This was toward the end of the war. And this story, this basic story of being in the war and being captured, was the story our family knew. To us, it was the totality of his service. But service he never, ever talked about. While reading Dad's diary one evening, as we were preparing a college project with my daughter, his words touched my heart and inspired me. In it, Dad wrote this: "A lot of things I'm not going to write because they're not exactly nice to talk about. I know God was with us, and He answered our prayers." And then listen to this part. "I learned men even better than before. Some were good, some were bad, some were better, and some were worse." Although I had read his diary several times before his passing and several times after, those words for the first time inspired me to look further into his service and to uncover the true story of his time as a POW. One evening, just past midnight, I searched Dad's name and rank on my computer. Remarkably, his name appeared in a New York Times article entitled "Richard Nixon's Search for a New York Home." The article recounted how an attorney named Lester Tanner sold his historic townhouse to the President of the United States in the 1980s. In the article, Mr. Tanner mentions the bravery of his Master Sergeant and names him Master Sergeant Roddy Edmonds. And he said he saved my life. Well, I'm stunned. That's my father. And who is Lester Tanner? What does he mean by bravery? Is Mr. Tanner still alive? He's got to be close to 90 years old at this point. And so I searched for Lester, and I find him in New York City. Now, I could spend hours telling you about the trip that we made as Tennessee hillbillies to New York City, but I'll spare you that. Dad was the highest-ranking American soldier in Stalag 9A, a POW camp for non-commissioned soldiers near Ziegenhain, Germany. It was near the end of the war, late January 1945. Now, the Nazis had strict anti-Jew policies, even in the POW camps. It's beyond my comprehension. And they would segregate Jewish soldiers from non-Jews and send them to their certain death in murderous concentration camps. As a matter of fact, American Jewish soldiers were told by the Army, if they fell into enemy hands, to destroy their dog tags and never mention their Jewish identity. Late on the evening of January 26, the Germans sent orders to my father, very explicit orders, that they wanted only the Jewish Americans to fall out at the next morning's roll call. Just the Jews, no one else. All who disobeyed would be shot. Without hesitation, Dad turned to the men in his barracks and he said, "We're not doing that. Tomorrow morning, we all fall out." That's what they did. It was bitterly cold that morning, January 27, 1945. As the Nazi commander approached, he couldn't believe his eyes. All the Americans, nearly 1,300 soldiers, were standing in sharp formation. Now, some of these soldiers had to be helped out there. They were in such bad shape. The German, a Major Ziegman, was shot. He's in charge of all the POW camps, all the German POW camps. He's the eyes and ears of Hitler, one person removed. He reports to General Jodl. And Ziegman is furious. He rushed to my father and he screamed, "They cannot all be Jews!" To which my father calmly declared, "We are all Jews here." Well, the major was even shocked more. And then my father continued. "Major," Dad said, "under the Articles of the Geneva Convention, the prisoners of war are only required to give you name, rank, and serial." "Don't quote regulations to me," the major screamed. "Were my orders not clear? I want the Jews, just the Jews." Well, standing on Dad's left was Sergeant Lester Tannenbaum. Yes, that's Lester, a 19-year-old Jewish kid from the Bronx, whom Dad had trained since basic. He was one of Dad's best soldiers. On Dad's right is Sergeant Paul Stern, a combat medic from the 28th Division, another Jewish kid from the boroughs of New York. And Dad said Paul was A-OK in his book. Ensuring eye contact, my father leans into the major and said very sternly, "Major will give you name, rank, serial number. That's all." Well, Dad's defiant bravery, Lester said, swept through the ranks. No one moved a muscle. Well, the Nazi turned blood red, enraged. He lunged forward and he pressed his pistol hard into my father's forehead. And he screamed, "Sergeant, one last chance. You will order the Jews to step forward, or I will shoot you right now." Well, by this time and this point in their experience, Dad and his men had seen untold horrors. The brutal battle, the Battle of the Bulge, the bloodiest battle in World War II. A death march lasting several days. No food, no water, no ice, no hope. Bombing while imprisoned in boxcars, left for dead by the Germans. 40 days of starvation. The men were losing, on average, a pound a day. They were miserable. They were haunted by lice, dysentery, and trench foot. They were forever hungry, forever cold. And just 2 days earlier, from this moment in time, Dad and his men were marched into this camp for the first time and were forced to watch the savage execution of a young Russian soldier, and threatened the same would happen to them if they disobeyed orders. Dad had been interrogated, he'd been kicked, he'd been beaten, he'd been smashed with rifle butts, been bitten by dogs. He'd been stripped of his dignity, and the only word that he ever shared with me when I asked as a college student, "Dad, what happened over there?" "Son, we were humiliated. I just don't want to talk about it." Maybe that's why Dad wrote in his diary, "No one can realize the horrors an infantry soldier goes through. You get scared." And I mean scared. So don't think Dad wasn't scared out there, and don't think all those other men weren't scared. But they stood in their fright for what was right. Dad stood strong, brave, resolute, along with his men. Lester told me, he said, Chris, your father never wavered. That's a lesson for us. Well, suddenly Dad spoke. He spoke calmly, courageously in his booming baritone voice. Major, you can shoot me, but you'll have to kill all of us because we know who you are. And you will stand trial for war crimes when we win this war. I like that part, don't you? And then he added this, and you will pay. He spoke the truth. Lester said immediately the Nazi turned white. The arm holding the gun began to tremble, but it was still placed firmly on the forehead of my father. Finger on the trigger. Time froze, Lester said. No movement, no sounds. Just the smoke-like puffs of frozen breath drifting skyward. And I believe along with lots of prayers. Lester said it seemed like an eternity. No one knew what was going to happen. Then suddenly, without warning, the major pulled the gun to his side, placed it in his holster, spun around, and marched away. And he never came back to ask for the Jews again. Lester said, we went back to the barracks and really cheered your father. And we knew we had a leader that was going to help us through this horrible situation. Well, Dad's righteous actions saved the lives of more than 200 Jewish Americans that day. And 2 months later, Dad led a revolt by all nearly 1,300 of his men to save the day again, and saved all of the American POWs by refusing Nazi orders to march out of camp on a death march to run from the American forces. I'm glad that Dad stood for what was right. In 2016, as Rabbi has shared with us, Yad Vashem honored my father as righteous among the nations. To me, that's the highest honor Dad can receive this side of eternity. And we are so grateful to the nation of Israel and to Yad Vashem and to all the Jewish people for that great honor. This high honor was given for him because he risked his life, a non-Jew, to save Jews during the most horrible evil that could be inflicted upon mankind. Dad was honored, as the rabbi said, as only the 5th American and the first U.S. soldier to be named righteous. It's amazing. And he's the first of the righteous, Yad Vashem tells me, to be recognized for saving American Jews. And of course, back home in Tennessee, I say he's the first Tennessean. More than 13,000 people are alive and well today because of Dad's selfless, righteous actions. What you do and what I do matters. It makes a difference. While there are many lessons we could learn from Dad's life, I want us to learn that one lesson I mentioned earlier. I hope you've seen the lesson of love, unconditional love. Love that takes the risk regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the consequences. Lester described Dad's unbreakable love at the righteous ceremony, his love for God and his love for humanity. He described it this way. He said, Roddy could no more have turned over any of his men to the Nazis than he could stop breathing. He just couldn't do it. A righteous man. We need that same devotion to God and one another today. Let me ask you, are you glad you're loved? Oh, it don't sound like it. Are you glad you're loved? Yes, I am. I know you are. Next time well, matter of fact, right now, turn to someone and smile and tell them you're the best looking thing I've seen all day. And what did you get? A smile in return. That is so good. And that's what our hateful world needs. Needs love from little o you and little o me. Anti-Semitism and hatred of every kind is on the rise. It's not gone away. and it's growing. It is evil. It is wrong. Hatred of others did not find a place in my Father's heart, and it must not find a place in your heart and in mine. You see, love is powerful. It's the cure for hatred. You can't fight hate with hate, but you can defeat hate with love. So like my Father, let's leave here to express love. Your ordinary life, lived well, is extraordinary, even heroic. And I'm on a mission to inspire heroes everywhere. I see a bunch of ordinary folks in here. Everyday, ordinary, get up and do what's right kind of folks. Sprinkle what you're doing with a great measure of God's love toward others. Your life matters, and it matters most when you love others better than yourself. You know, the Talmud teaches the same. He who saves one life saves the entire world. So I'm asking you as we leave here today, grab your cape, go save your world. One kind word, one good deed, one loving action, one precious life at a time. Be the hero. So I want to thank you for allowing me to share this morning, and I look forward to our conversation together.
Beautiful. Thank you. Looking forward to the next part.